Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Hello everyone. We hope you brought your coats. Because Tuesday is here, and it is a beautiful cool evening from within the climate-controlled 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are gearing up to talk about pyramids, gods, devils, Nephis, Anunnaki, Enki, fucking Enlil, giants, aliens, pyramids, huge rocks, floods, glaciers, pyramids, dreams, spirits, demons, angels, pyramids, and of course, snakes.
Welcome back to Snake Bros.
That was amazing.
That's the voice we've been talking about.
The one that goes. He listens to entire books in that voice. That was great.
Yeah, thanks their default voice
Android voice
for that intro. It was beautiful. And we did bring our coats because we knew Tuesday was coming.
That's right. I am a banana.
I was trying to hide that from Russ so that he could actually laugh for the first time.
I heard you play it. I heard the voice, and I thought, oh, he must be trying to record a segment of it so that he could say, so here's what it sounds like. And that was close.
Yeah, that's
I was not expecting the intro. I'm like waiting for him to come in, waiting, and then it's just like. Great.
So you can hear how she says the Anunnaki, the Anunnaki,
The Anunnaki.
and fucking Enlil. So yeah, I was trying to refresh the whole Anunnaki story, and got this Sitchin book, and honestly, I don't even know what the name of it is. I can't remember. I'm dumb.
It's not the.
Should have looked at that. I think it's the Lost Book of Enki.
Okay, yeah.
But all I could see on the title was Lost something. But anyway, it's I'm still in the introduction, and this computer voice is reading it to me, and it's quite strange.
You gonna play a little bit of it?
You want to?
Let's hear a little bit. Just a little bit.
Oh, all right. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the Lost Book of Enki.
As for Marduk, to the land of the two narrows he went. To be the master of the second region, once established, he expected. 283. Now this is the account of how the second and third regions were established, and how Ningishzida was exiled and Unug-Kiarda threatened. When Marduk, after a long absence, to the land of the two narrows returned, Ningishzida as its master there found its lofty lord Ningishzida was.
She's butchering the names worse than we do.
Yeah. So I don't feel so bad. The whole thing is written like Yoda was speaking it. And I'm not sure if this is basically his.
It's like a grammatically correct translation or something.
It's like what Marduk had once planned and instructed by Ningishzida was overturned. What is it that happened? Marduk of Ningishzida to know demanded. Of the destruction of hidden things, Marduk Ningishzida accused. Of making Huron, blah, 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 verb.
Yeah, that's
blah, 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 verb. Blah,
That
blah,
sounds
blah.
like they're keeping the syntax intact, basically.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking too. Like, this must be as directly translated as you could. But I know that, Sitchin's specific translations are in there because
they got Yoda's,
rocket ships are in there.
They got Yoda's syntax from Sumerians?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, he has rocket ships, which is a shim or a name. He has the landing platform, which is obviously what he is translated or what he thinks is Baalbek.
Yeah.
And because they're talking about the cedar forests.
Yes.
The
place of the gods is in the cedar forest. Yeah.
Right.
Must be Baalbek.
So I can tell where Sitchin's sort of translations are in this thing, especially when they're talking about getting on the rocket ships and coming over here and all of that kind of stuff. It's really interesting. But it's a direct, just like
I have the Lost Book of Enki too. I know what you're talking about. It's like the very beginning is the scribe, right? Saying like,
yes.
so I've come here to my Lord Enki, and like, and
right.
basically starts writing down what the the god is just telling him, he's dictating.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's writing down, or no. Down, he writes, listening to the. I don't know how it works. I can't imitate it yet. It's pretty interesting though, man. It got me through the day.
Yeah,
it was a fascinating story.
I think what is it? Graham Hancock's main criticism of Sitchin is the rocket ship stuff. He's like, he took 1970s space technology and just totally associated it with these ancient Sumerian writings. And it's just, and it's like he was doing this in the 70s and he's just associating the rocket ship technology of that time with it. But, to me, that seems less weird now that, because of like all this, the geometry of the universe and things like seem to like coincide strangely. Yeah. It's like maybe the Sitchin was doing it at that time when it was harmonizing with the rocket technology, because I don't know, I mean, like that would not surprise me. I don't know,
man. I wouldn't really describe it as the rocket technology of the 70s as Graham Hancock did, because what he's talking about is like these. He actually goes in descriptions of these engines that are using crystals and water and all this weird shit.
That's true. Yeah. But maybe the words rockets. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because a rocket doesn't go and then land on something. It's like,
And one of the criticisms that Graham had of him was like the trilithon, which are the three massive blocks on the wall, this corner wall or whatever at Baalbek.
Yeah.
He's like, this is a wall, not a platform, and you wouldn't want to try landing a rocket ship here.
Right.
Well, in this tale, he talks about how after the flood, they came down and they saw that the wall was still standing.
Right, that was all
part of the platform.
Yeah.
That was the original.
Right.
Right. So he's like, he wasn't saying that this wall is the platform. He was saying that this is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I would like to talk about Baalbek. That site is fascinating.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so
this is the tangent cube.
That is true. Yeah. Is this a tangent? Cannot determine. Well, it is like one of my favorite ancient sites. So we could talk about that now, or I don't want to derail.
No, I don't want to go back over the whole story right now. I still want to. Yeah, the Anunnaki. I still want to get. I want to finish this. Maybe listen to it a couple of times.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, because there's a lot of details.
There's a lot of details. So I know just enough now to realize how much I didn't know before and how much I still don't know. So I don't think I'll try it yet.
Right. We have levels of standards here. Like we try to only get most of it wrong. Not all of it. So if you look at the site, if you look at the Baalbek site now, it's really complex because of all the stuff that's on it, right? People have been building on it for thousands of years. But what's interesting about Baalbek is that you're looking at all this stonework, and you can clearly see that as you go lower in the levels of stone, like in other words, as you approach the ground, the stones become larger. In general, I mean, they just do. They, up at the top are small brick-sized stuff, and as you get down lower, you get to things that are the size of medium boxes, and then you get to stuff that's like the size of, I don't know, a car, and then you get to stones that are the size of houses or whatever. Like the Trilithon blocks are 60 feet long by 16 by 19 or something like that. I mean, they're just huge.
Yeah. You can see some pictures on Google Images of people standing next to them, but you don't know. They're like, hey, look, there's one of the blocks, and you're like, yeah, that's a pretty big block. And they're like, and then the
little dot right there
is a guy. You're like, what?
You're like, holy, yeah. And by the way, like I should mention this, we are now, and from starting with show 10 moving forward, we will always have pictures in the show description, so you can. Whatever podcast viewer you're using, or even if you're just going directly to the blog, you should be able to scroll down past the show description, and there will be images, about everything we've talked about. Hopefully, if I can find them. Sometimes we might talk about stuff where I'm just like, yeah, there are no pictures of that, guys. Sorry, don't have pictures of the 11th dimension.
Can't prove it.
Pixar didn't happen. Yeah, so there will be pictures in the show notes, basically in the description of Baalbek. I've got a big collection of them, so some of those will be in there.
That was an official tangent.
That was an official tangent about official matters, though.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
And you finished it with Baalbek, so it's cool. Ever detangentizing.
yeah, that was actually a brief tangent. If I'd have said briefly, then it probably wouldn't have been. Anyway, so okay, there's one main temple still standing on the site today, and that is the temple of Bacchus, who was the wine god. So that's pretty cool. He's the god of wine.
And do they know who built that, or?
It's either the Greeks or the Romans.
Okay.
Bacchus was the Greek name for him. Maybe the Greek name was Dionysius, something like that.
Okay.
It's Bacchus or Dionysius. Basically, the dude was the god of partying, right? Really. We have the word bacchanalia comes from the name Bacchus, and that basically, like, a bacchanalia is a culture-wide massive festival where everybody puts on masks, takes all their clothes off, and goes out in the street and goes crazy. Like, those are bacchanalias. Yeah, I'm serious. That's craziness.
Once you put a mask on, you can take your clothes off.
That's right.
And it's cool. As long as they can't see your face.
That's right.
Everything else is cool. If you want to show your face, put your clothes on.
That's right. Yep. You gotta go naked?
That's
put on
weird.
A mask. It could be even a small mask. Just make it really crazy so that people only see the mask.
Yeah.
Like
So
that.
I thought also there was the Temple of Jupiter, but I guess it's not complete, right?
All that's left of the Temple of Jupiter are 6 columns.
That's right.
And they're huge. Those are also humongous. So when you look at the columns of Jupiter, and this is hard. Like I've developed this picture stream to kind of try to give people the idea of the scale of things. Because if you just show somebody a picture that they're like, okay, that looks cool, but they have no idea that the Temple of Bacchus they're looking at, which is intact except for the roof, that they're seeing all these pillars and they're seeing the base or whatever, and you have to look really closely to see those little dots down at the bottom of everything. Those are people,
Yeah.
It's humongous, and this is and the Temple of Bacchus is small compared to the entire Baalbek site, which is mostly platform.
Right.
Okay, so the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and probably everybody else in that area that knew about it, they revered this place. The Greeks, they called it Heliopolis. It was the city of the sun.
Yeah.
So the Romans built the Temple of Jupiter, which is the largest temple they've ever built anywhere, on this site, which is all the way at the edge of their empire. Okay, Lebanon was it was like out in the boondocks to them. So why did they build the biggest temple they've ever built to their chief number one, like top of the line god, way out there in the edges of everything? Because they wanted to build it here. I mean, that's the only. They knew that it had to go on this site. Okay.
Yeah.
Because Zeus is their top god, so Zeus is Jupiter. So they're building the Temple of Jupiter out there, and it has to go there because Baalbek was the place of the gods, and they knew this. What's interesting though is if you look at if you kind of use Google Earth, and I'll have pictures of this too, as you look at the overhead, you can see where the Temple of Jupiter went, and it's kind of on a like on a piece of the platform that sticks out, right? So it's
Like
got
it's sort of a peninsula.
yeah, it's like its own little porch section there or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't actually fit on it. Like the temple is offset so that there's like on the one side of it, there's a whole bunch of platform left over. Like they couldn't make it go all the way across because they didn't quite have the technology to make the roof reach all the way across that huge space. So they built the biggest temple they could, but it doesn't fit on that section of the platform, which is one argument that alternative people use to argue against the mainstream people. Like, look, they didn't build everything because
Right. So the mainstream belief is
Romans built it all.
The Romans built the platform as well.
yeah,
And we're not sure about that.
Yeah, I think it's obvious. and there's so many different ways you can look at it. The erosion on the oldest blocks is just so massively different from the stuff that the Romans built. You can be like, look, that was there long before they did any of this other stuff.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just obvious. Then there's the stone of the pregnant woman, that humongous one that's still in the quarry.
Right.
And it's got I don't know why that's the name of it, but that's what they call it. But so if you go to the quarry, which is about a mile away, but it's over mountains and ridges and weird stuff. There's no road between the quarry and the Baalbek site. Okay, but in the quarry is this gigantic stone that was like, comparable to the trilithon, but even bigger than those.
Right.
Still kind of sticking up out of the ground, and people have known about it for a long time. So, but it was buried. It's it's been dug down so that now it's exposed. And the mainstream idea is that, the Romans like cut this block out and then decided that it was either too big or it had a flaw or something. So they didn't take it to the site to use it. And that's just retarded. They would have cut it up into smaller pieces because it was already quarried out and everything. But so they're just like, this block's too big. Just put it down and we'll go cut some more stuff out.
So I've also heard the idea that they cut blocks big from the quarry, and then as they move the block,
pieces fall off.
They break. They chip some corners or whatever through the process of moving it.
Yeah.
And then so that when they get it there, they can then shave the entire block down
again
to make it all fine. And what do you think about that?
Well, I've talked to a lot of masons about this, and they're like, well, okay, they do have this thing where they'll leave like rough surfaces on stone so that if it is big and heavy, that when they get it to the site, they'll actually smooth, but they're like, we don't leave it like substantially larger than it's going to be. Like it'll just be something you can polish down, just a little bit of, But they, I think this is right, if I'm remembering correctly, they were saying that the actual edges and corners of things, they did perfect. So you can see these kinds of stones, like there will be this band of smooth, and then in the center, there's like this like more rough.
I have noticed that with like old stone buildings, the edges where the stones meet are very fine and polished, but the middle sections, the flat surfaces, on the vertical sides, are rough.
Yeah, so that
it looks cool too.
It does look cool, but that is that's what they would leave rough. But they would actually do those edges because they're like, if you leave them rough, then it's more likely you can knock stuff off.
Right. And they won't stack right.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, there's also, and this was found more recently, but there's one of these like the stone in the quarry. They found one in the middle between the quarry and Baalbek. Like it's dropped in the midst of the mountains, right? Like you look on either side of it, and there's a mountain there, and there's like a huge ridge there, and it's just like.
Well, that one was too big, and they had a flaw, so it was like, put it down.
Yeah, put it down. We'll go get a different block. And it's actually been quarried. You can see it like you'll be able to see these pictures. It's got weird sort of chunks taking out of it, and that was probably local people quarrying it themselves. They're like, wow, look at all this rock, and they're like cutting pieces out, not knowing that it's actually a gigantic block under the ground, or maybe they did, I don't know. Yeah. But somebody quarried it for pieces, but they didn't try to pick it up.
Yeah.
They're like, nah. And again, there's no road. There's not even a discernible path between the quarry and the site. It's just, I have no, I've talked to Dad about this because he has a lot of experience in moving extremely heavy loads, and these blocks we're talking about are like, I mean, the estimates range from 1,200 tons to 2,000. 2,000 tons is like 4 million pounds. I don't even know what the family sedan conversion would be for that. How many family sedans is that?
A lot.
Yeah. So, and I asked Dad, I'm like, Dad, so how would they be moving these? And he's like, sky crane, which basically is like, it's like a steel worker's inside joke, which basically means a magic hook that just comes out of the sky that picks stuff up for you.
Can pick up anything.
Yeah, sky hook. We do have cranes that could lift these kind of weights, but they have massive infrastructure, right? So if you look at ports, they have these kind of cranes that sort of run on rails, and the driver sits up in there and like looks down through a big window, and it's got and they pick up these shipping crates off of like
barges.
Barges and stuff like that, and they can you can build humongous ones of those that can go, but they can only move on the rails. Right, and to make the rail, so if we were doing this now, there would be this gigantic rail system basically going from the quarry site to the building site, And so we would have to flatten all those mountains and everything and basically smooth it all out, you know. So there would be obvious signs of
rigging of some
rigging
sort,
of stuff, yeah, for us to move and there's just nothing. It's like they were like, man, this block is heavy, put it down. And they just walked off, like, and actually there's sites like this all over the world. That's the other thing. There are humongous blocks dropped in between quarry sites and megalithic sites all over the planet. But I won't tangent on that. I'm just going to say that is a weird thing. Anyway, so the mainstream thinks the Romans did all of this. They're like, they built everything, including the platform. And I actually went and read there's like a main paper that was published by German archaeologists or whatever, and they were only allowed to sort of dig around the footings of the exterior wall. They weren't allowed to do anything else. They had this very specific area that they could dig in, and they were looking. When you read the paper, it's clear that they were looking for evidence that the Romans did it,
Right.
which is completely unscientific. That's what they were looking for. And the paper is humongous, but basically it comes down to two things. A piece of what they call graffito, which is basically some unofficial, non-carved, just like sort of scrawled onto a stone. Graffito, you know, it's like, it's not modern graffiti. It's ancient graffiti, so they call it graffito.
That sounds old.
Right. And it basically is the graffito basically is like it's a praise to like one of the Caesars. I can't remember, one of the rulers of Rome. Okay. So that allows them to date it to that period. They're like, look, so, you know, and I'm like, yeah, but that was that was a fallen piece of rock from the Jupiter temple. So no one's arguing with you that particular stone from that particular temple was not built by the Romans. Of course, that was the temple of Jupiter was built by no one's arguing about that, but they're like, well, this proves the whole place, the platform and everything was built by the, you know, I'm just like, no, bro, it doesn't. And the other thing that they use, and they go into massive depth on this, but it comes down to a stylistic comparison with the, I guess what you would call the core or gigantic wall blocks, the basement or sort of foundation blocks at Baalbek, with some blocks in Jerusalem for the Temple Mount platform.
Right.
Okay, and they're like, well, we know that Herod built that. And I'm like, no, you don't. But you don't know that. We know that Herod added to it, right? He had this huge building project where he was basically adding stuff, and you can see, it's pretty clear when you start looking through people's pictures of the area, what's added on and what's not. I mean, you'll see these, I've got pictures, and I'll put some of these in there, of walls of stone where there's a bunch of nice, they're huge, but there's a bunch of nice dressed stone, and then down at the bottom is one gigantic one that's like really weathered compared to the others. I'm like, that's original.
Right.
You know, and Herod was fixing stuff. He probably had them pull out, you know, whatever. But there are also sort of pathways that go beneath the platform in Jerusalem, where they've really unearthed some, just immense blocks. Okay, ones that are like the size of the Trilithon blocks out there. But the ones in Jerusalem are strange because they have square holes that go all the way through there. How do you make a square hole? And in some of those square holes, sticking out of them are the remnants of what look like 2x4. So they basically, the square is basically the size of a 2x4 if you cut it, you know, the profile of a 2x4. Some of the square holes have, obviously a board coming out of it, and the boards are petrified. Like, they're stone. But they used to be wood. And I'm like, okay, that's old, right?
Holy shit.
I mean, maybe the process of petrifying would be accelerated.
No. They were using stone wood. It's incredibly strong.
They were cutting down petrified trees
to make
2x4s out of.
To build the rigging.
That's right.
The blocks. Those blocks are fucking huge.
Look, you gotta use stone. So maybe the process of petrifying wood would be accelerated if it was jammed into a gigantic block. I don't know, because if it's jammed into this humongous stone, maybe the petrification process is quicker. I really don't know.
That's crazy.
But that doesn't matter. The point is like there's two main questions. You're like, okay, that's a giant block. I mean, huge. How do they? Well, more than two questions. How did they get square holes in it? Unless they set up a 2x4. They set up basically a mold with 2x4s going through it and poured something in there that then became the block that looks like stone to us now. Okay.
Yeah.
Like in other words, it's some kind of like what do they call it?
Aggregate or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's concrete, but it's basically using some sort of technology where it's indistinguishable from stone to us.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a name for it that I can't think of right now.
That's actually really what I'm leaning towards thinking about, like the huge walls at like Sacsayhuaman with that bulge out and everything, and they've got these weird indentations and all that. That's what I think.
Whenever they're using sedimentary rock, I'm pretty sure it's that's what they're doing. Somehow they're disaggregating limestone into powder. And then they have some kind of process in which they can then pour it into molds or whatever, or in place, and then it becomes stone again later.
Right. Because they've got...
But when they're using granite, nah.
Yeah, exactly. But they've got these tests, like I think we talked about this before, where, you know, they've got the limestone, and it's the same as this limestone, but the limestone over here in the quarry has all these fossils in it.
Yeah.
And the limestone that came from the quarry that's on this wall, the fossils are...
shattered or something.
They're like crystallized. They were some incredible amount of heat was applied.
That's right. Okay, yeah. So and there is vitrification of the outside, like the first couple of millimeters of the outsides. Yeah. So vitrification is basically.
But that doesn't really work for. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, but yeah. I'm just saying vitrification basically means the outside layer of the stone was turned into glass by some incredible heat.
Right.
You know.
But that idea doesn't really work for Baalbek, because you've got the whole stone sitting there. Right. Coming out of the quarry, and then you got the whole stone over there on the side of the mountain, and then you got the 3 whole stones.
Right, like if you were pouring your stones, like why did you pull this one at the quarry? Just bring us the liquid.
They were just testing it, and then they tested the pour again in the middle of the mountain.
That one's too big. Leave it there. Shouldn't we like grind it back up? No. And actually, recently, I don't know why it's always Germans, but somehow Germans always get the permission out here. Like it was Germans doing Göbekli Tepe, it's Germans at Baalbek, you know, trying to prove the mainstream, and then it's Germans in the Baalbek quarry and they were trying to prove that that stone, the big one that's still there, they're trying to prove, like, because they have been telling people for years that it's still connected. They didn't dig it all the way out because the left side of the stone or whatever, or the bottom part was underground basically. So it was tilted, so it looked like, you know, so since nobody could see that corner, they're like, yeah, it's still attached down there, but nobody actually knew that. Okay. So these Germans got permission to sort of kind of dig around in the quarry, and they dug down around this stone, and instead of finding that it was attached to the rock still, they found out that it was sitting on 2 even bigger blocks that are stacked up.
Man, I'm now thinking, like, I wonder if they found anything to carbon date under this, like in the quarry.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
They probably did, and they were like, throw that away.
Yeah, just throw it away. Set it on fire right now.
So the other thing that they use as an argument, and you'll probably know about this, the column drum that's in part of the wall of the foundation.
Yeah, that's like, it's ridiculous. A column drum is basically like when the Greeks or the Romans were making columns, they actually would make them in pieces and then stack them on top of each other. And they did it really well so that it looks seamless, but they couldn't, you know, like the Egyptians with the obelisks, raise an entire column whole. They had to stack them.
Right.
So a column drum is basically a piece of one of the columns. It's just a, you know, like a slice.
Like a cylinder.
Yeah, it's a cylinder, a sliced section of the column. And there's one place okay, so Baalbek has been made into makeshift forts for many, I mean, you know, over and over. So when they have wars over there, like some army comes through, like kills everybody in the area, sets fire to everything, and then like uses a lot of the stone at Baalbek to sort of, and they rearrange things into a fort. You know, so that's been done over and over and over. So that's why when you look at the site, it's incredibly confusing, because you're like, wait, that's a piece of a temple over, you know, there's pieces of carving things like stuck in wrong place. And you're like, okay, how did that get there? What the fuck? So you have to keep this in mind the whole time you're looking at it. So the column drum is kind of jammed into, is it in the big retaining wall?
It's in the wall, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so.
And it's down near the bottom, so they're like, or the bottom of whatever's exposed.
But,
so
is it the platform for the temple, or is it the big outside wall that has the big gigantic
could
stones?
Be wrong. I think it's the big outside wall. I just remember this in Magicians
either one,
of Gods.
Yeah.
Like Graham is arguing with the archaeologist who's like, see, obviously because this column drum, it's the Romans.
Yeah, but yeah. So, okay, so you're right. It's probably in the the sort of non-attached exterior wall that has the really humongous stones in
Right.
it. And so down at the bottom in one area, this column drum that's obviously from a Greek or Roman temple has been jammed in there sideways so that you can see the circular profile of it. And they're like, look, that means, you know, because it's down there at the bottom, and it's because it's the Romans obviously made this thing, that means that the whole, you know, and Graham's like, first of all, like, no, because like, why would the Romans be like, yeah, just jam that column drum down in there? You know, like what's his,
Or maybe they did.
Petronius, like, fuck that thing up, just jam it down there.
Yeah, but his point was just simply that so many times, like what Russ is saying during wars or whatever, when they were making forts, like they would also refurbish parts of it as like, you know, you don't want the wall to be missing a lower corner in or whatever because
like,
it's a
keep
weak
getting
spot.
shot in the ankles.
Yeah, so they repair it in order to use it as a fort, and that's like one of the ideas. Is like obviously this part of the wall had been heavily, you know.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
damaged.
When you look at the exterior wall, you can see that there are places where, for whatever reason, there's just a square, like, you know, it looks like sometimes people cut doors through it, like there's like doorways through it or whatever. So, you know, then they would fill that with rubble stone from around the area. So this column drum is kind of jammed in, and I keep saying jammed in because literally it looks jammed in there. But the archaeologists are like, no, they put that down first, and then they put the gigantic block on top of it. And you're like, no, they didn't. I mean, like, come on. Why would they do that? It's round.
They used it to roll the gigantic block into place.
And then they couldn't get it out. Because, yeah, you know, on the one hand, they're telling us that the Romans were like these amazing builders, which they were, right? They were amazing, competent builders. But then on the other hand, they're like, yeah, and they just like jam stuff down at the bottoms of these gigantic walls because, you know, whatever. No, dude, like that's an obvious sort of, I don't know, like late repair. In other words, like sometime when all the conflict that's been going on in that area for the past 1,000 years, you know, sometime around there, somebody was doing that. It was not the Romans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely forgot about the column drum argument. But back to what I was talking about with Jerusalem, the archaeologists in this paper that I was reading, after, you know, going through how amazing the graffito was and how it like totally pinpointed the era that they thought everything was done in, you know, they're like, look, it even talks about this. And I'm like, yeah, so you guys were cherry picking, but that's okay. And normally, you know, if that particular piece of stone with its graffito on it had said something anomalous, their first thing that they would have said was been like, well, it's not in situ, like it was laying on the ground, so it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Anybody could have written on it anytime, right? Which is true. But when it says what they want, they're like, oh, look at this. This is perfect. It says exactly what we want, you know, and then they hold it up as a piece of evidence. You're just like, dude, no. The other piece is like a stylistic comparison to blocks at Jerusalem. And I don't know, I'm just like, okay, so because you think that the blocks, these giant blocks at Baalbek, look very similar to giant blocks in Jerusalem, both of which are at the bottoms of everything. You know, they're down underneath stuff. So they're obviously the oldest parts of the structures. I kind of agree that those could have been built by the same people.
Right.
But they're like, it was Herod building the stuff in Jerusalem. And he was like a Roman appointed head of, you know, of the Jews or whatever. He was like the king of Jerusalem or whatever, appointed by the Romans.
Right.
And I'm like, no, Herod did repairs to the platform. That means he was not building the biggest blocks that are at the base, at the bottom, the middle of everything on the platform over there.
Right.
But that's what they're talking about. So, I don't know. I tried to completely debunk the whole thing, but they were just like, well, look, okay, so maybe if it wasn't the Romans, it was the Phoenicians. And that was their answer to that. And I'm like, we don't even know who the Phoenicians were. That is a word that we use for people that kind of showed up in ships all over the place, but nobody knows where they lived, you know. It was the Phoenicians. I mean, you know, these guys that could build ships and totally move giant blocks.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
With snakes.
Snakes! Blocks of snakes!
Blocks of snakes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels, demons, monsters, serpents, scriptards. We are Nevas. We are Brothers of the Serpent, where this is a show where we scriptard the scriptards.
Derp, skirp, derp.
So we've been talking about impossible blocks, which is that's what I call these gigantic blocks that are just pretty much impossible. Somebody made them. You can use that argument, like there they are. So
Yeah.
so they can be done.
So we did it.
Yeah.
Because they're there.
Yeah. I'm just like, they're impossible and they're
Aliens.
blocks. Sky hooks. My argument on this is not aliens, by the way. Maybe aliens were involved,
Yeah, I know.
Could it be that there were aliens involved with these giant blocks?
I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens.
It was aliens, yeah. The Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki.
So, yeah.
They're impossible.
They're impossible. And they're blocks. Impossible blocks. Yeah, and they all, when you ask archaeologists, like, well, how do they move these blocks? They tell you all kinds of shit. They make up all sorts of stuff, but nobody's ever tried it.
Petrified toothpicks and dedication.
That's how they carved them.
No, I was really thinking about that, though. I would like to have a petrified toothpick. Like, it wouldn't bend at the tip, like right when I really need to get that one piece.
Right.
The little
Man, we
tip.
could make a whole line of like petrified toothpicks. Dedication.
Lasts forever. Dedication. Sorry.
No, this is reminding me of like a bunch of stuff people have said about how things were made in Egypt. Like, I just recently read an article where they were like, okay, so there's all these anomalous blocks in Egypt, okay, more impossible blocks, or there's like the drill cores that we've talked about, where it looks like the travel of the drill was going down millimeters per rotation. And you're just like, no. And basically this article was like, yeah, so there's all this stuff, but like, it can all be explained by primitive tools. And then they fail to explain any of it. They just say that it can be explained.
And they made the mistake one time of trying to demonstrate how to build a pyramid with primitive tools. A tiny one.
Yes.
Minuscule. And they weren't actually using primitive tools to cut the stones out of the quarry. They were using primitive tools to move the stones from the quarry that were cut with modern tools.
By professionals.
They were just trying to say, look, we have hip and rope and slaves and copper chisels, and we're going to move these big stones and stack them up. And they were very small stones compared to the stones in the pyramid.
Yeah.
And it was a very tiny pyramid. And they failed utterly to do...
What did the guy say? He was like, it was a complete disaster.
Yeah, it was a fiasco. It was like... So, of course, they buried that test, and they just went back to like, well, it's there. They did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We know
I think their argument was like, so that our slaves, which were, graduate students, right?
Yeah,
so they're archaeology graduate students equals slaves.
They were
right?
snow slaves.
So the guy's argument was like, well, so we totally couldn't build a pyramid, and we totally couldn't do it. We completely failed to do anything we thought we could do. But the graduate students got a lot better at failing to move that block. Basically, is what he's saying. They failed to move it to where they were supposed to do, and failed to like lift it up and stack it. But they got a lot better at failing
to do it. Yeah.
He was like, the first block, we worked on it for like days, and then by the end we only spent 8 hours failing to do it. I'm just like, okay, so that doesn't really help your argument, but
yeah. So they don't do that anymore. Is my point. Like so there's all these stone vases, right?
Yeah.
The stone vases are, they have these very slender necks and very wide bodies, and they're carved out perfectly, and they're made out of
every kind of
all kinds of stone, ridiculously hard.
Some of them are beautiful because, like, after they've carved the stone out, you can see all these multicolors in it because the stone is.
And some of them you can see light, like you shine a light and it's
translucent.
Translucent. Yeah. It's so thin. And they're like, yeah, they just, there was a guy up there spinning a stick with some rocks and keeping it going, and there was a dude down below just like putting sand on it, and it's like, oh, really?
And
can you demonstrate? No.
Yeah, they're like, well, you can see like modern people in Egypt doing, and they'll show you like if you're watching a movie or whatever, they'll show you a a short clip of some guy like spinning a stick, and it's got 4 rocks in the bottom of it, and he's supposedly he's making some vase or whatever, but it doesn't ever show you his completed project, and it doesn't ever look like it's going to be like one of those. I mean, there's some of those are huge.
Yeah.
They're humongous, and
So the
throats are like less than an inch across, and then you've got like 3 feet of bowl underneath that, and you're like, so how did they do that with a little stick with the rocks?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So they learn very quickly that since they can't demonstrate how to do it with primitive tools, they won't try.
Right. They just tell you. They just treat you like you're stupid for even thinking that it can't be done. Now, okay. So I will say, recently, I don't know how recent this was, but they did try to move a moai. Okay, like one of the Easter Island statues. Okay, but it was the same deal. Like they had it professionally made. So it wasn't obviously they wouldn't move one of the actual moai because that's like that would just like break all kinds of snowflake rules. But just destroying people's culture for no reason whatsoever except for science. But anyway, they had one. I think it was made of concrete, right? Because when I was looking at it, it was like a light gray. I'm like, that's a concrete moai, right? And it was small. I mean, I would say 1/3 of the size at least of an actual moai, and it shows them that they've got it on its back, and they're like rolling it across logs, right? And they're like, see, like see. And I'm just like, okay. So I've tried to explain this in many different ways, and I don't know how effective any of them are, but the difficulty of moving heavy loads does not go up in a like a straight line. In other words, like to move something that is 1 ton versus moving something that is 100 tons. The 100-ton thing is not 100 times harder to move. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of times harder. In other words, it's like orders of magnitude, because 100 tons starts to break your materials, and it itself will break. Like, right, you got this 1-ton thing, and it's difficult to pick up and sort of difficult to move around. But if you put it on a log, the log will probably be able to roll it. But if it's 100 tons, that log just shatters. It just disintegrates when you put 100
so
tons.
So you have to put a lot more logs on there. But they didn't cut a really long 100-ton block. It was a short 100-ton block that's like massive.
And like a 100-ton block made out of the same kind of stone as that 1-ton block. If the slightest thing happens, like say one of those logs does shatter as you're rolling it across, and the block drops a couple of inches, it can crack all the way across. You can, because it's still just as strong as it was when it was 1 ton, but now it's 100 tons, and a drop of a couple of inches of 100 tons is a lot of inertia, and that'll break the whole thing. In Peru, there are tons of humongous blocks that are just sort of left lying on pathways. Okay, so Peru it's mostly up and down. Like in the Andes, you can stand at Machu Picchu, and like there's a river that's not too far away from you laterally, but vertically it's a kilometer below you, right? But it's only 50 feet that way or whatever, right? So the quarry for Machu Picchu is across the valley on the other mountainside. So they're cutting those blocks, taking them down a very, very, very steep hill. I mean, it's like the sides of the valley are steep as hell. A kilometer down to the river, crossing the river, and then coming a kilometer back up to put them at Machu Picchu. And you're just like, what? Why? The place where they're building Machu Picchu is made out of the same rocks, and they had to cut a bunch of it away. So why are they building it with blocks from over there?
That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's
skyhooks.
Right. Well, they seem to have, I'm just guessing, but they seem to have very specific preferences on the exact makeup of the stones. Like if you look at Stonehenge, the famous central hinge stones are what's called bluestone.
Right.
And they come from a very specific quarry over in Wales, which is like 500 miles away.
Right.
But that bluestone rings when you hit it.
Yeah, it's resonant.
It's called lithophonic.
Yeah.
So anyway, there are humongous blocks, and they're very precisely cut. So you look at these ones in Peru, and everything is sharp and smooth, but they're just like sort of sitting on this mountain path, right? It's like a goat path, So there's this huge block sitting on this mountain path, and it's like obviously they were taking it down the path to get to the bottom of the valley. So this one of the kings of I always forget, is it the Aztecs or the Inca that were down there? I always get it. I think
I think
It's got to be the Inca, yeah. So this Inca king was like, I can totally do this, right? Like, I will be like our ancestors and we will move one of these blocks and take it to the place where it was supposed to go. They moved it. He had 30,000 dudes, okay? He had 30,000 guys out there. They succeeded in moving it maybe 10 feet. It killed 3,000 or 4,000 of them and they quit.
Jeez.
Because they were trying to move it on this very steep or whatever, and they lost control of it briefly, and it killed thousands of them.
Oh my God.
Okay, and he was like, "All right, we're done." And I think that was a wise move. But the point is that these guys were dedicated, and they thought, well, no, surely we can at least get it down the hill or something. No, it is not. There are many things that complicate moving these huge blocks. One of them always is there wasn't a road. There wasn't a flat place. Yeah. They were in rugged terrain, and they seemed to not really care that there wasn't anywhere to stand when you're trying to move this giant block.
Yeah, or that wasn't an issue for them.
Right. They don't.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't.
Whoever
the path was
originally did
for
it.
the
goats.
Yeah, the path was for the goats.
The path was for the guy with the horn.
Yeah.
Floating the block over there, just
whistling. Right. There's always stories accompanying the building of it. First of all, they say it was built overnight, right?
Stone set.
Yeah, it was built overnight. And they'll say that the guy was whistling, or he was
singing it.
Singing, or yeah.
Farewell.
Or it floated through the air to the sound of trumpets.
Right. Yeah. And there's actually this is a really fascinating story on that subject because it's contemporary, it's a modern story, but it's when Europeans and English people were first sort of getting into Tibet. Okay, they were getting into Asia and kind of observing these people doing their stuff there. And there's this story, and the guy who tells the story, I can't remember his name at all right now, but he's credible. He had a lot of stories that he told from his visits through India and then Tibet and China. And he tells this story of there were all these monks and they were doing repairs on one of their temples. Okay, and he said that there was a big arc of them standing down at the base of the cliff, and the temple was up at the top of the cliff, which is basically a vertical rock face, and the temple was way up there. And on the ground in front of this arc of monks was a sort of a depression in the ground that was bowl-shaped in rock. And they had sort of maneuvered a big block into the middle of that bowl shape, and all these monks that were sort of standing facing it in the direction of the rock face had various instruments. They all started to play them, and the freaking block, he said the block just suddenly started shaking and then lifted and floated up to the top of the cliff, where it was then pushed manually by the other monks to get it over to the temple to fix it. Okay, that's
freaking bad.
And he was just he's an Englishman. He's like, what the fuck, what just happened? And then of course the monks told him that's how this was an ancient thing that they knew how to do because there were sort of records in their temples or whatever that they had read, and they noticed that it talked about one of these bowl-shaped depressions. They're like, hey, there's one of those right down the cliff right there, and they tried it and it works, So I don't know. I mean,
anti-gravity bowls,
right? Resonance. You whistle at it and it floats.
Duh.
And there is, now that I think of it,
that's why you're supposed to whistle while you work. Just makes it easier.
Yeah. See, the dwarves knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just whistle and the rocks just start flying around by themselves.
Yeah.
So now that I think of it, there is I think this is in India. There's a temple. India is full of temples. They're everywhere. Okay, there are temples everywhere, and there's one specific one that has a huge. It's not gigantic, but it's a big stone that's sort of in the yard in front of it, right? And the stone is it's not huge, but it's too big for a person to move by themselves. It's maybe too big for 2 or 3 people to move by themselves. But it's famous because supposedly, if you get 11 people, you all go up to it and you just have to touch it. Each person has to touch it with a finger or 2 fingers or whatever. You're not trying to lift it or whatever, but everybody touches it, and all at the same time they say some specific phrase. I can't remember what it is, but it's some specific phrase, and the stone will just fly up into the air. And of course, everybody then backs away and it drops back down to the ground. Okay, and that sounds completely ridiculous, but credible people have gone there to confirm it, and that it works. They get because all the locals know about it. So if some reporter goes there and he's like, "Hey, I want to kind of try this thing out," and they're like, "Oh yeah," and they all come over, And they do it, and the reporter's like, and it fucking worked, and I have no idea what the hell's going on, so I'm just going to move on to get a different story. Bye.
So I was talking about that book, From Atlantis to the Sphinx.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes through a whole part about shamanism in that book. And he's talking about the magic of shamanism, right? That goes back for thousands of years or whatever. And in there, I only listened to this book once while at work, so, if any of you are at this part right now, if you're actually reading it,
yeah, you did say you said I have to stop listening to it to do anything important.
Yeah. So it's I'm gonna try to get almost all of it wrong, but not all of it.
No, okay. Just don't get all of it wrong. Yeah.
So yeah, he's talking about the magic of shamanism and not so much about that, but magic itself, right? Yeah. And he's talking about this whole thing where, people, you have someone lay down and then each person puts one finger underneath the person.
Light
you got like
stiff
4
as a
people.
board.
Yeah. Light as feather, stiff as a board or whatever.
I've tried that and it does work. It's weird.
Right. And in this particular thing, he's talking about 4 people doing it to a grown man, including like the guy's daughter who's like, is 12 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
And it working. And no one knows how, but he was connecting it to consciousness,
right?
And how people focusing on something, this idea, a single idea, and putting action to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But he got there. He got to this particular thing, lifting a person with one finger. 4 people lifting a person each with one finger, by talking about shamanism and how the shaman would lead the tribe in their way of thinking about stuff.
Yes.
Okay, so the shaman, in preparation to go on a hunt or whatever, would, go out in the woods and he'd pick some mushrooms or whatever, some...
entheogen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And bring it back, and everybody... What the fuck is an entheogen?
Like, it's a hallucinogen. I just don't think they're hallucinations.
Okay.
I like entheogen.
Okay, I like that. All right, cool. But I was like,
that thing. Wait.
What?
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, so he would pick some mushrooms, some magic mushrooms or something to that effect, some hallucinogen, a cactus, whatever. And he would give every person in the tribe some of it. They would all sit down and do this sort of ceremony around the fire at night or whatever. And he would guide their visions.
Yeah.
And bring in like all these animals, a parade of animals, and then everybody would see all the same stuff, and he would be guiding it in and out. The next thing come the serpents, and then the lion, and then all the deer and all this stuff. And then he would go do these weird rituals out in the woods where they bury a boar's head that from their last hunt or whatever in this specific way at this place, facing a specific direction with some herbs and some whatever, just typical like nonsense seeming, this is a spell, of course.
Right.
So did some magic eel's eyes out of
I have nuked.
whatever.
Tongue of Dude.
Exactly. So he would do this thing in the woods and then bless it and do all this stuff. And then they would do the hunt the next morning, and just all this game would come in, and they would just have this massive, feast afterwards. They would have, but in the events where the shaman didn't do this stuff, their hunts would not go nearly as well. They would be difficult. There would be problems. They wouldn't get them. So he's talking about, like, even if you distrust the whole idea of magic and all this kind of stuff, look at shamanism, because these tribes had no reason to keep shamans around and fed and given all of their sustenance and everything, because they didn't hunt, they didn't do anything.
Their job was to be weird.
Right. If whatever they did not work, why did it last for thousands of years?
Right.
And why do tribes still have them today?
Right. It isn't like the gigantic priest hierarchies, these huge institutions that we have that last by themselves, even if no one wants them. Right.
Right.
That it's one guy who's like very strange. You could easily just like, dude, get the fuck out of here.
Right. But still, I mean, even looking at modern day religions, like there are millions and millions of people that follow these faiths.
Yeah, I'm just saying that like the faiths have lasting abilities in and of themselves. Like they've got because they're institutions. Whereas you've got like one weird guy, old dude or whatever, in a tribe. Like he doesn't have an institution behind it. Yeah.
Tribes are not. Yeah, they don't have institutions.
Yeah. He
They're not
is the
institutionalized.
institution. So and like he's just got his hut, and they could just be like, yeah, get out of here. You know.
Right. Or I mean, it's just the idea that if, say, backing up to when the first shaman shows up on the scene and starts doing some things, if they didn't work,
Yeah.
there would never have been the second shaman. But obviously, something was going on where they were like, that works.
Yeah.
And so eventually they give the shaman a new pupil when the shaman's getting old.
Right, he
and
chooses it, yeah.
Or he chooses one.
He watches the village and he picks the weird guy. Like,
Yeah. So there's something about that, and I just think that's cool. Like the idea that we can, come together, and you see this even in modern religions where people coming together thinking about the same thing in terms of prayer or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make something happen?
Well, we actually, like, and I'm talking about you and I, we have been doing this in one specific way for years. I consider it to be an ongoing experiment, and it has never failed. You know what I'm talking about with the hiccups?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so like, and you guys should try this because it completely works. Like every freaking time somebody gets the hiccups, there's always somebody in the crowd or whatever that's like, oh, I got a way to stop it, and they'll have something like drink whatever and then say this 5 times or whatever. So Kyle and I Kyle had this original idea, and I heard him say it, and I was like, that's brilliant. And I've been doing it every time somebody gets the hiccups, I'm like, I got a perfect thing to stop, and I act like I've got some old folk remedy, but then I just make up like 3 steps.
Yeah.
I just completely make them up out of the air, and they have to be weird. And not like nonsensical, random, and not connected. And it fucking works every time. Like even if they don't do the steps, they're just thinking about it, like what the hell, and they stop having hiccups. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I just recently did it to one of my friends. He was like, "Man, I got the hiccups." I was like, "I got the perfect thing," and I can't remember what I told him to do, but I said stuff that doesn't even make sense. I was like, "Count your toes backwards," right?
And do it.
And so he's like,
jumping jack
he's like
3
thinking
times.
about counting his toes backwards and like all this shit, and like the whole time. And I said the 3 steps, and I waited. He didn't do any counting or anything as I said, but he never hiccuped again, right? I'm serious, this works, okay? So this is like shaman magic, okay? It takes a little bit of creativity. You understand the goal, like their goal is like, we want to catch a bunch of shit, right? So it takes a little bit of creativity, and you just make the ritual up. The point of the ritual is to get everybody thinking that this is gonna this is gonna fucking work. Like this is so weird, it's gotta work, right? And then it does. It's badass. So like one of the things that modern science has a problem with these ancient healers, okay? So ancient healers like this too, like, and I've looked into this a lot. There are people, there's one that's down in South America that people call John of God, like John of God, okay?
Of God. That's a great last name.
Right, John of God. It's not his real name. That's what people call him. But
We have a lamb whose name is of God.
that's right, Lamb of God. So I think 2 or maybe 3 days out of the week, this guy John of God will go out in front of his place, and he has a sort of a mountain respite, the place where he stays or whatever, and like he goes out and just sits in front of this, and there will be this humongous line of people already lined up, and they just all they do is file past it, and they just walk very slowly past it, and people are crippled, they're like in the last stages of cancer or whatever, and he sits there, and like every once in a while he'll pick somebody out of the crowd, he'll just say like, you come over here, and then he'll do something really weird to them, and it freaking heals them no matter what they've got. And sometimes he like does actual operations, like where he starts doing cutting, and he's using like he isn't cleaning the tools or whatever, other times he does like what they call spirit operations, where he's not actually doing things, but he's making motions over the person's body like he is cutting or whatever, opening things and stuff. And dude, the thing is like no matter what he's doing, it freaking works. Like he excises tumors, he has like completely healed people of cancer. And of course, what he says is that he's not doing any of it, right? He says he's the, I can't remember the word he uses, but basically he's the catalyst.
Facilitator.
Yeah, he's the catalyst. And people believe, and I think Jesus says this at one point, by your faith you are healed, right?
Right.
Like because you believed that it would work. It did.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one story in the Bible where he's kind of walking through a crowd. Jesus is walking through a crowd, and somebody who's like laying on a stretcher like reaches out and manages to touch.
Woman.
Yeah, she touches his hem and is healed by it, and like he didn't even know she was there. But it says that he felt the power leave him, and he's like, "What? Whoa!
Who touched my clothes?
Yeah, who just like stole heal themselves?" So, of course, modern science and medicine can't handle this. They call it hoaxes, right? You know, the person is just, they don't have a procedure. They're not really doing. They're making stuff up. You know. But the point to me is like, but it works. Like, who cares if it doesn't seem scientific? Because what science is really about is like looking at something, observing something, and saying, okay, so what's happening? But of course, the scientific community and the medical community is saying, because they're not using things we're familiar with, nothing's happening. Yeah. And that's just, nah.
Hello.
Yeah, that was a great point about the shamanism. I do think that they just made stuff up a lot of the times.
Well, yeah. I mean, they didn't have books, you know, that.
What is
they were
interesting
taught.
though is that like shamanism all over the world looks the same. In other words, that you kind of see the same stuff, you know, and like, how did they have this idea of shamanism like all over the planet, all these different tribal cultures?
Yeah, I don't know.
That there's like one guy who was the weird dude he was like,
Unless, okay, so we're talking about also impossible blocks and
Yeah.
all these,
right,
you know,
yeah.
massive structures.
Magic and moving stuff.
If there was an ancient civilization that had, you know, high technology,
Yeah.
right? Perhaps they also had high
They
magic.
had high shamans, yeah.
Right. And they may have not had this big divide between sort of spiritualism and science.
Right. Yeah, well, I see often that people say that the ancients did not separate religion and science.
Right.
They just didn't. To them, these were the same thing. But religion's really the wrong word, because they weren't using religion like we do now.
Well, there are
Like the study of creation and divinity, basically, is what.
right.
The
But
spirit world. Yeah.
There are modern scientific studies now going on about spirituality and
Yes.
you know they call it fringe science and stuff. People
Yeah.
doing
Parapsychology too. Yeah.
yeah. So there are, you know, we're getting somewhere, but
What's frustrating though is that we were getting the same places right before World War One. Like, so up to World War One, we were kind of, parapsychology was either in the same place evidentially or whatever, or even past us. I mean, they were like, scientists were going to like huge medium seances where they were like calling forth, you know, like physical material out of nowhere. And like, I've read a bunch of these reports or whatever, and these were like the top credible scientists of the day going to these things and making sure that no one was hoaxing anything or whatever, and then reporting stuff flying around and all the voices and shit. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was credible back then, and then we had World War One, and so all of that stopped. Because everybody just suddenly, this is the other thing about war, is giant conspiracy on this. Like, we all focus on the material to the exclusion of all else. Like, no one cares about spirituality when the Germans are coming.
right. Well, some people do, but
Only when they're dying.
Yeah,
And they're like, why can't I see my mother? And then they die. So it's like we lost all of that through the World War period. Like World War One and then II. And then we come out of that having just won these wars through pure materialistic technology.
yeah. So there's this idea. I can't remember. I think it was this book I was listening to. Mysteries of the Pyramids, or something about Mysteries of Egypt. And the
Okay.
guy was talking about how he was going through this whole idea of the beginning of everything and consciousness in the beginning, and how our consciousnesses were our bodies, and our consciousnesses, since we didn't have large physical bodies with all of this stuff, we existed way more in the spiritual realm. And the more material,
That's right, yeah.
as the material develops and grows and becomes, it coalesces more, and we don't have this big cloud. We have a sun and some planets, and the spiritual begins to
Fade.
manifest, okay, in the material.
Right.
And the more this happens, the more we're shifting towards a material plane of existence. So, and I don't buy into this idea as like, you know,
That's right. It was
a
like something
linear
about density, right? Like,
Yeah.
As the material became more dense, Like we start to sort of lose contact with the spirit side of stuff or whatever.
Right, or we're just moving more into the physical than the spiritual. Like
Right.
we used to exist purely in the spiritual, and as material advanced and coalesced,
Right.
we started diving into this material, and the more advanced that our consciousnesses like make the material, the less we are in the spiritual realm.
Right.
So I don't look at it's an interesting idea. I don't think that that's the answer to everything. I just thought it makes sense even throughout my life. For example, when I was young, I think I was a lot more spiritually aware.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the more difficult the task is to remain spiritually aware. And sometimes I'll go through like these, low points where I am not feeling spiritually
Yeah,
aware
zero.
at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I have to like work back into that. It's an exercise. But yeah, I can see like how a war, this, all this melee damage, is causing people's minds to move more to the material.
Right.
Right. Some people obviously would move to the spiritual in a time of war, and those people exist. But I think overall, when bombs are hitting and destroying buildings and things are collapsing on you and you're getting shot and people's arms and legs are being, dismembered right in front of you.
Kind of like not worried about stuff you can't see. Right?
Yeah, it draws you into the material. So even like the advent of television,
Right.
People sitting in front of this material, watching all of this material shit take place.
Yeah. Even though it's like etheric in and of itself, the transmission
Right.
is something you can't see that's coming through something that you can't tell.
Yeah,
that
maybe
nobody knows what it is.
Maybe that was a bad judgment.
No, I think it's a great one because you're right. To me, it's interesting that it requires this etheric thing in order to work.
Yeah.
But no one cares about that.
All right, we're up on time here again. Damn, that was quick.
That was cool though.
I went by fast. Impossible blocks and
They're impossible.
spirit moving blocks.
They move them with snakes. Snakes move those blocks.
Flying serpents.
Millions of snakes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Brothers of the Serpent. Two brothers talking endlessly about anything and everything and nothing in particular.
With kick-ass bumper music. By the way. All the music is made by me. No, it's Kyle's.
Limitless conversation by two limited individuals.
That's right.
Snarky cynicism, sophisticated sophistry, and slithering sarcasm.
Smirky snark.
Snake Bros. So we were talking about, at the end of the last segment, the idea of the possibility that we can live or exist more in the physical or more in the spiritual through time based on occurrences and things that happen. Like, one of the things I was thinking of was the Great Awakening. And then there's a couple of these, like in
Right, yeah, the Renaissance.
recent, in American
revivals.
history, where just like everybody suddenly gets incredibly spiritually active,
Right.
and begins doing things like the revivals, for example.
Yeah.
So
Weird glossolalia, or however you say that. The speaking in tongues.
yeah,
Like there's
which is genetics.
yeah, well there is ideas that because where does that come from? It sounds the same. Like when people do it, it sounds the same. It does have linguistic properties, like it is a language. Yeah, I've heard people speaking in tongues, and I'm just like, okay, you don't know what you're saying. Neither do I. So why is this helping?
Maybe it's because
somehow spiritual.
It's like the intent. So there was a couple of things I thought of. It's the thought that counts.
So keep having it. Good.
Yeah. No, but how many successful people, incredibly successful people, have written books saying, "Think positive."
Right.
Now we know that any materialist scriptard could be like, well, yeah, because you get depressed and then you don't do anything. Yeah, exactly. Right, but the idea of thinking positive is, it's easy to think negative. That's the easiest fucking thing. That's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
Thinking positive is difficult. It's a mental exercise. And
That's me. You have to kind of consciously do it. Yeah.
right, and just by thinking positive thoughts, you begin to feel better about yourself, about what's going on. But what is that? Because you could interpret a thought, a positive thought, as being some verbal thing going through your head. Well, this is okay. This is good.
Plus
I
more.
feel okay. Plus more. And those positive thoughts may be, interpreted any way you want. But the fact is that thinking positive ultimately can result in you actually feeling better, which is a spiritual thing.
That's right. Yeah.
So this idea of like the surface cognition, like of the things around you, just the way the dialogue in your head is going along, and you're proactively thinking positive thoughts, may not really be a direct spiritual thing. You're like forcing this idea.
But it may facilitate it. Yeah.
But it may facilitate this idea of a feeling of delight, or a good feeling, a satisfied feeling.
Yeah.
Or and even a feeling like I can fucking do this.
Right.
That feeling right there. The people that go into incredibly difficult situations and come out a winner or come out alive, they were thinking that shit. They weren't going in there going, "Oh my god, lose.
Oh my god, this is gonna be so hard." Yeah.
Right. So you had brought up earlier, this idea of sports records.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead.
Okay. There's when you look at just record holders, like, so somebody sets a record on some physical activity, like running a mile is a good example. So you can see this pattern. It's like it goes throughout history. Like there will be a record set, and that record actually will stay for a long time, and people will kind of approach it, but they won't break it. And decades go by, like it used to anyway. So like the 4-minute mile. This was like a record. I can't remember what the dates were, but it wasn't that long ago when a 4-minute mile was like one person had done it and it was a record. It stood for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever. Then somebody broke it. And then a whole bunch of people broke it right after that. It's like they were like, oh, it can be done.
Yeah.
Right?
They weren't, in other words, they weren't going in there thinking like, you just can't beat a 4-minute mile.
Right.
After the 4-minute mile
it got
was beaten,
right.
They were like,
wait a minute,
it can be beaten.
Yeah, it can be beaten. Yeah. So but before that, they were just like, that's the top record, and like, I just want to get close. I just want to get close.
Yeah, I can't beat that.
So you see this, like somebody breaks the record, and then bam, a shitload of people break it, and then actually the record becomes normalized after that. Now you can't even get into a high school track team if you can't run a 4-minute mile. I mean, that's like, so you see that what used to be like the pinnacle record is now like you expect the high school kids to do it. Like otherwise you're like, dude, you can't even run on the track. Like, get out of here.
Yeah, and some of that may have to do with the,
revolving,
the increase in our technology and our ability to human mobility. In other words, people being able to move from this place to that place. People coming here from all over the world or going there.
Right, and I've heard people say that it's our medical knowledge, so we understand now what kind of exercises to do to make it,
But they don't all fall into that mold. It can't all be based on that.
Right, I completely agree. I'm just saying that this is one of the explanations I've read for this. But here's the thing. So another trend you see over time is that records, like somebody used to set a record and it would stand for years, decades. Now they're constantly broken. Like pretty much we're in a place now where a record's set and then it gets broken soon after that. There's the pattern of like a record is set and stays a long time is no longer a thing.
It's because they're juicing, bro. You juice?
That's right. They all juice.
The juice keeps getting better and better, though. Like, they made this badass juice, and it lasted for like 40 years, and then somebody made one better, and then now they're making better juices all the time.
So basically drugs, yeah. Well, another good example, and this can't be explained by juicing, is motocross. Okay, so motocross, like just turn on a motocross game today, or a motocross event, and watch it. Like the stuff that they're doing, those things were like completely. They're routinely doing things, like 1080s while barely touching the handlebars while spinning in place and all this bullshit. They do that over every jump and they're warming up, right? Those things used to be like Evel Knievel was gonna jump over the Grand Canyon and do like a 760 or whatever. It wasn't gonna be anything. I mean, that guy was at the very cutting edge and he was blowing people's minds. But when you go look at the tricks that he was supposed to do, and then you look at what motocross guys do, like every time they hit a jump now, it's ridiculous. Like that, and this is what they do for a job. It isn't. They're not doing amazing things. This is their job. So I spin 140 times, with my motorcycle going the opposite direction beneath me while I'm touching it with one finger. It's just, every day, right? Whatever. Seriously, I mean, it's not that crazy, but when you look at it, it's I don't know. It's like, the ability to do this has become, it's gone beyond the ability to explain it with human neurology too. So the other one that I like to look at with this, or the example that I like to use, is base jumping. Which is basically like you put on a freaking flying squirrel suit and run off a cliff, right? You just jump off a cliff. Okay? Somewhere in that squirrel suit, there's probably a parachute, but basically they stretch their arms out and there's there's a membrane that goes between their arms and their feet that gives you like 5 square feet.
A little forward travel when you're falling.
It gives you 5 square feet of of plane wing or whatever. And and of course they'll do it with GoPro cameras on their forehead, so you can watch videos where these guys just run and jump, and they're falling past the cliff that they just jumped off of, and there's obstacles. Okay, in other words, there's things sticking out of the cliff, trees, boulders that they have to dodge, and they're falling really fast. Terminal velocity they'll reach, and so I can't remember where I was reading this, but they did this, because neurologists looked at this and they were like, nope, can't do it, right? That actually is impossible because the objects are coming up at them at a rate of travel, hundreds of miles an hour, because they're falling, okay? To where by the time the person notices the object and the amount of time from when they notice it to where it's in a place where they've got to do something about it, because you have lag times in what you can do with your freaking squirrel wings to move past it. So you can see how much time that is, and it's like tiny fractions of a second, which is not enough time for the eyes to pick up the signal of the light from this thing, send that to the brain to interpret it into an image, then a decision to be made, and then those signals to be sent down to the appropriate limbs for them to start turning. There's not enough time for that to happen, and yet it's flawless. They're dodging shit or whatever. So when they go to interview these guys to ask them, you're totally doing something impossible, what's happening? And they're like, yeah, I know, when I first jump off, I'm like, fuck, and then everything calms down. I'm serious, is what they say. They're like, when I first jump off, it's like, oh fuck, I'm gonna die. And then they say that everything becomes very calm, and there's this voice. It's like, okay, just turn your wrist a little bit to the left now, and then everything's gonna be fine. Turn your head a little bit to the right, and they just follow it. They call it being in the zone. The zone is the best athletes know about this. You get into the zone, and everything becomes easy and perfect, right? That's when they play their best. These guys this is why they jump off the cliffs. Because it induces it, because you're like, I'm gonna die. This is going to kill me, and then it doesn't, because this happens.
So that brings up to my mind the idea of quote unquote superhuman strength.
Right, higher. There's the higher self idea, right? That really we're spiritual beings, and I always think of it in terms of there's a big glowing ball that's you, and it's able to kind of jam a small glowing ball into this physical thing. But most of it's still not in there because it can't fit. So that's kind of kind of watching what you're doing or whatever. But the little glowing ball that's you in the physical thing it's too small and dumb to be aware of the big glowing ball, really. So the big glowing ball is back there kind of trying to help you out, but you're always forgetting what it is,
Yeah.
So when you get into these situations, I mean, this probably causes the third man effect, which I don't know if we've talked about on the show, but it's basically that people get into life-threatening situations and this has happened over and over and over throughout history. Like the most famous one is with Shackleton, who was he was the guy that kept trying to get to the North Pole on a wooden ship, right? Like he's daft, but he's like keeps sailing a wooden ship up trying to get to the North Pole, and then the ship would get ice locked, where basically the ice would freeze and surround it and start crushing the boat. And then he's like, okay, so we need to now get out of the boat and walk back to to the nearest station or whatever. So him and his first mate, when this first happens, they get out of the boat and they go and they walk across hundreds of miles of Arctic ice, which should have killed them because there's big fissures that they should have fallen in, but they didn't. And when you read their journals, they both thought that there was another person with them that was helping them out, that kept encouraging them to wake up because they would fall asleep and then
Making them think positive thoughts.
right. So that's why it's called the third man effect.
Right.
Like there's something else there that keeps you going, that gives you the right decisions. There's a little voice in your head that's like, just turn your wrist to the right, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's connected to the sports things being broken specifically, like the zone, the higher self, the third man, and then like the fact that sports records keep getting broken. But it does seem to be connected in some way. Like
I see the connection there, but in terms of like these sports events, there may not be a third man, but
the third man's there, but he doesn't have to step all the way in because you're not about to die, right?
Yeah.
So, but in extreme sports, and it's not just base jumping, the third man always is there because he's the voice when they go into the zone that's telling them what to do.
they may not be seeing him physically or whatever. Like in some cases, the third man effect happens because there's like an extreme feeling of loneliness or it's over or whatever,
right.
You're by yourself and whatever, and then someone comes and helps you out of it.
Yeah, the most extreme version of that I think was the Everest guy that was caught. Him and his group were caught they were climbing Everest. They were caught in a landslide. It broke both of his legs and like crushed his ribs, and it killed everybody else in his party. So he's like out there. He gets out of the snow, but he can't walk. He's bleeding, all this whatever. And then some woman comes up and says, "No, you gotta get up. You gotta go." And he's like, "Oh my god!" Dude, I can't make it. Well, he freaking like thumb crawl, like nose crawls basically. He can't use anything but his fingers and shit. But he goes like many tens of miles through the snow, dragging himself to safety. And when people ask him like, "How did you?" He was like, "Well, it wasn't me. It was that woman that was. Where's she at? Where's she?" And they're like, "There's no woman, bro. There's like a trail of blood and fucked up shit all the way up there. It was just you." So yeah, the whatever the third man is, whether it's a higher self or not. I mean, this probably is the idea of guardian angel. Right. So you see this throughout history.
So yeah, that's the third man effect. Kind of reminded me of the footprints thing, right? Which is
what the fuck, third man? Like right when I needed you, you were gone. He's like, "Bro, I was carrying you. Okay, get out."
Yeah. Exactly. But going back to the breaking the sports records, like
that's more like the material stuff, right? That connects to that idea.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like there are these material things that we're having to deal with all the time, right?
Yeah.
There's this difficult thing.
Like doing your 1080 while you're spinning it back.
Yeah. And you can only this person does the most hardcore one, and it's like, man, that's the best ever, and it goes on for a while. There's always like this long period, and then, well, not always, but
not anymore. But they're used to it. Yeah.
But then somebody breaks it. And then everybody starts breaking it.
Yeah.
And then eventually somebody they keep setting it, and then someone sets this really high one, and
there's a period
where
people are like, wow, that one's like way up there. Yeah.
And then boom, they break it again, and everybody starts breaking it, and then it becomes normal.
Right.
So, let's go back to impossible blocks. Like, what if
this does connect to that.
What if we started this thing where it's like, all right, we're gonna move this center block.
Okay.
And then we keep moving bigger and bigger blocks with 5 people.
Okay. It does kind of look like that because they're building with
5
block
people,
and the blocks get bigger and bigger.
5 people move this block and they bring it up a hill, and it's like, oh my god, like 5 dudes can't do that. No, that seems crazy, but we just did it and we have documented it, and maybe it'll go for a while, and then 4 dudes will move that block.
Right. Or they'll cut a bigger block and the 5 dudes will move this bigger block.
Right.
See, I've actually thought of this does kind of connect too. that I want to go out to one of these gigantic blocks and try it, light as a feather, stiff as a board, and see if we can fucking pick it up.
Yeah,
Like, just, like if it works on people, why don't it should work on blocks, right? I don't know.
You had the one with the rock,
Yeah, where the 11 people, and it's like there's a number or whatever. But yeah, so maybe you can do it.
But yeah, this is the idea.
But it's probably aliens.
Really, the idea is perhaps it was mind over matter to move these blocks. It was not, archaeology wants to say it's only material science.
Right.
Right. So of course, if their technology, if they didn't have huge cranes and building all this, they must have used ropes, and maybe they did, but that wasn't all they used.
Well, they just tied the ropes to them and then they went boom, and it like started to float, right?
Yeah.
There were ropes there, but they were like guitar strings.
Yeah, but so this whole idea in shamanism of the entire tribe thinking, being directed, their thought being directed by the shaman.
Yes.
About the hunting, right? That's part of it. Like the shaman doesn't actually do it by himself. The tribe has to participate and trust him, right?
They all got to have mustard seeds, yeah.
Yeah. And then he leads them in this thing, and so all of their minds are focused on this one idea, and then they go out and execute it, and it's freaking flawless.
Right, and of course the shaman actually will say that he didn't come up with this ritual either, that it was given to him by the agent of the plant that they're taking, or by the gods in the spirit realm, or whatever. But the agent of the plant is very fascinating to me, because like ayahuasca is a vine that doesn't have any hallucinogens or entheogens in it or whatever. Right, but they refer to the brew that they take that is like DMT, whatever, as the ayahuasca drink, as the ayahuasca brew, because according to them, you meet this feminine entity that is the entity of that plant, of the vine, not the thing that can, whatever it is they're using, the shroom or the whatever that they're getting the DMT from. They don't talk to that. They don't name that one. It's the ayahuasca vine. So that fascinates me too. Like, why is she is the facilitator, right? The ayahuasca vine is why the drink works, because you can't orally take DMT, but the ayahuasca vine has chemical in it that makes that possible. But they don't know that. Like, if they did, it's because they say the gods told them. Because when you ask them, like, well, how did you guys come up with this brew? Because that's another impossible thing. You got impossible blocks, then you have impossible. Like a magic with that brew, like you need DMT from a shroom or something like that, but if you eat it, DMT doesn't work because there's an enzyme in your stomach that stops it. But the ayahuasca vine has a like an enzyme inhibitor that stops that enzyme from working. So if you drank brew made from the ayahuasca vine or the shroom, or you ate either one of them, nothing would happen. Right? So there's no idea. You don't get an idea with this shroom. Like, man, if I mixed it with this vine, it'd be better, because like it just tastes like shit and doesn't do anything. And same thing with the vine. You make a tea out of that or whatever. It doesn't do anything and it tastes like shit. But if you mix them together, it really tastes like shit. But then you trip, right? I mean, people that drink it say it's the most
power of positive thinking.
Right? Positively. Oh my god! And then by the way, after drinking it, you spew liquid from every orifice. Because it's a purgative, like a massive purgative.
Keep thinking positive. This is great.
Yeah. Like, seriously. I mean, you like puke and diarrhea, and then finally you're like completely hollowed out, and you meet Mother Ayahuasca, and you're like, hi, thanks. And she's like, this is a wonderful spiritual experience. You're like, no. It was totally material.
I gotta try that.
I'm sitting in a pile of shit and puke.
Yeah. Power of positive thinking. Right. I'm gonna try that.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
That sounds amazing. And and it actually does. Like, despite the people describing the taste as being the most vile thing they've ever tasted, and the purgative process, which lasts like an hour, being horrible, I'm still like, man, I got to go down there and do this, right? But back to the question of like, how do they figure out to mix it when people have asked the the shamans or whatever, they're like, well, the plants told us. The plants told us,
Yeah, right, shaman.
Shut up, shaman. You were just trying to find something nasty to make, and it happened to make you trip. Yeah, no, I don't think so. So the idea that we're interacting with some kind of like very very complex, populated spiritual realm. You know,
Right.
That it isn't just our glowing balls in there. It's like there's all these entities.
Yes. So this brings up another thing that I'm currently really fascinated by, and I keep getting a glimpse of this idea, but I'm gonna try to explain it. So the ancients talked about the planets in terms of gods.
Yeah.
Right. They looked at the planets as these gods, like, you know, Jupiter,
That they had personalities.
Mars,
Yes. Yeah.
right, all this stuff, and
Neptune.
right, and they, you know, they personified them. They gave them human
Agency. Yeah.
right. So there's one idea that, like, well, maybe they were just trying to explain astronomy in a way that kids will learn it and repeat it, and, you know,
Yeah.
make it easier to remember, and they're brilliant kindergarten
A is
teachers.
for axiom, your
Yeah.
home sweet home. B is for by and large, your very best friend.
Yeah. The idea that I like is that they actually looked at these planets, including Earth, as beings.
Yeah.
They have spirits, right? They may not build tools, except we're here. But anyway,
We're obviously tools.
I'm Dan Alex.
I know what you meant.
They build snakes.
Yeah. God damn it, guy. Stop building fucking tools all the time.
But no, but seriously, like, that idea is kick-ass to me. Like, I like to think of, you know, not only Mother Earth is like blah blah blah, and we
She
gotta
mean.
take care of her.
No. She done killing everybody. Everybody dying up in here.
But the whole idea that the planet, its course, its relationship with the sun, its relationship with its moons,
And the other planets. Yeah.
yeah, any planet, you know, whatever. We only
Sorry.
have one moon, but yeah, that they are beings.
Yeah.
And the solar system is a being, and the galaxy is a being, and the universe is a being. Like,
Right.
all of these things are different levels of spirits, basically, spiritual activity.
So when the ancients were talking about becoming a star, like they meant that literally, like
Right.
that those stars are actually beings. Or, yeah,
That's just a cool thought.
dude, it's amazing. Yeah,
I mean, look at the sun. Just go outside.
Look at the sun.
Look at
Yeah.
the sun.
Yeah.
It's
he's trying to kill you right now.
you know, this materialist idea that well, you have to have this really complex electrical thing like the human brain in order to have intelligence. Well, fucking sun must be a genius then.
Yeah, because it's incredibly complex electromagnetically.
Electrical shit.
Yeah, and sometimes he gets mad. Starts blowing shit up.
But hey, if that is true, that you know, complex electrical systems are, you know, connected in some way to a spiritual connection.
Yeah.
To the physical realm. then,
Boltzmann
like-
brains.
Yeah, Boltzmann brains. We're looking at the sun, and it's like, dude, that thing's been
That's right.
watching me every day.
That's right. That's why I do stuff at night, because the sun sucks. That's why secret shit is done at night, because it can't be seen by God, the sun. Helios is on the
Freaking
other
Ra.
side. Yeah, Helios on the other side of the world, Ra. He becomes Amun Ra, the hidden one.
Yeah, but he's got a mirror. You know, he's always looking at us with the freaking moon.
That's right. That's right.
Doesn't matter.
Shit.
That's why everybody gets crazy on the full moon, because
They're all lunatics.
hey, that's a good one.
Yeah. Luna is the name of the moon. You're a lunatic.
Ah,
Yeah.
never thought about that. Etymology. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it is weird how all the lunacy, all those words are connected to
Yeah.
the moon. Yeah.
Werewolves.
And yet when you look at, you know, modern science is like, the moon doesn't do it. It doesn't make anybody crazy. I'm like, yeah, you're a fucking lunatic, bro. If you think that.
I just think that whole idea is cool, that, you know, this is how shamanism, or these, you know, trackers, like in these Native American tribes, will like go around and They're doing more than just like, let me just, in the movies, it's like, oh, I can feel the footprint on this leaf, the depression
Like,
in
look
the
at
ground.
this tiny broken branch.
Yeah,
Like, no.
there's more going on there.
No, yeah. You're absolutely right about that.
So another thing that makes me think of is, like when you're hunting in the morning and the sun's rising, you get into say a deer blind or whatever, and it's still dark. And as the sun starts rising up, the birds all start making noises, and you can hear them all through the forest and all this kind of stuff. And like, I started thinking about that.
And they're never seen again, basically.
Yeah, but if you were able to analyze the sounds of all these animals that they're making throughout the forest, and when they shut up or when they move or whatever,
right?
If you could distinguish those things, which technically you could.
Yeah, we notice big trends, like when everything gets quiet, you're like, fuck, like it's
yeah,
because it's probably not if you're trying to be quiet and suddenly everything shuts up, you know that there's something out there that scared everything.
Right, but that right there is a signal that there's communication going on everywhere out there.
Yeah.
Like that's what they're doing. They're all singing around. Oh yeah, just the birds.
Or at least
they're mindlessly over there.
Or at least they're listening to each other, right?
Right.
Because like if everybody else shuts up, you're not gonna be the guy going out there going beep beep boop 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 beep boop, right?
Yeah, that one's when you hear beep beep boop boop.
Yeah. He did.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So there's all that type of communication, and then of course with modern science, studying microbiology, there's shitloads of communication going on in a totally different way on that level.
They're exchanging
chemical communication, electrical communication.
Yeah, take the Sprinter virus. Yeah. Unplug all your extension cords and shit.
Let me replicate myself and replicate.
And then duplicate. Dude, they find these ancient viruses that are humongous compared to the ones that we have now. The modern ones, like, a modern virus is like, they have a sort of an area of complexity. So they only get to so uncomplex, and they're only so complex, right? And they're kind of in the middle of this. But they find ancient ones, and I think they found one that's like, they think it's as old as the Earth at least, like 4 billion years, like, or whatever. And it's gigantic compared to, in other words, it's a huge molecule compared to modern viruses. And it contains...
Can't get into my cells.
Right. It's not even... Yeah. It has... I think they were saying it was like 80% of the DNA stuff that it contained is totally unrecognizable. They don't even... Yeah,
I do remember reading something about that.
And it's like, and they were treating it as like, this is the panspermia. This is the guy that came from space, because he does have, 20% that's recognizable is like the DNA of everything.
Yeah,
and then
that's right.
But it's just huge, and it has all this other information that is not being used by everything that's alive today. Probably because it went extinct in multiple cataclysms. Maybe the dinosaurs had some or whatever. But it's just weird to me that like there's these giant ones and they look constructed when you look at the shape of the molecule. It's like that thing looks like a rocket. So
that's badass.
I mean, it connects to the whole life system being a sort of, it was born from one seed, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can sort of see the whole system as being a being, a single being.
That's freaking badass. Just like we are. I mean, like our bodies are made up of billions of different little things.
I mean, are you sitting there all the time going like, come on, cells? It's like, seriously, fucking work together. Seriously, I'm trying to do shit right now. No, they're all just doing their own thing, but it happens to result in you.
Yeah, I go around thinking positive, like, hell yeah, cells.
Yeah, kick your ass.
And on that note, we're gonna take a snack break. What are you gonna say?
I was just thinking of that. What was the Bill Murray movie where they and Chris Rock was the white blood cell, and there was the. Do you remember that movie? I can't remember what it's called, but Bill Murray basically gets sick. He eats like a bad egg, and gets this virus. That was played by the guy that played Morpheus in the Matrix movies.
Was it part like cartoon?
Yeah, the cartoon. Yeah. What part was inside the body?
All right.
And there's
what movie is that, folks?
the sugar pill or whatever. It's like he's like, oh, it came from Oxford, blah blah blah. And then Chris Rock is like, man, when you were born on the wrong side of the digestive tract, like badass.
We'll think of the name, but you have to guess it.
Yeah, I can't think of it at all right now. It's a great movie though.
Snake break time.
Snake break.
Snakes.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for the final segment of episode 11. Brothers of the Serpent in our tangent cube of science.
Snakes.
And snakes.
Snake Bros.
So we are going to really try hard to tie all this stuff together. Go, Colin.
Okay. Detangentization process initiated. All right. So we started out with these impossible blocks. I think that's where we started. But
well, we're talking about something that we've got on the ball back.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Impossible blocks. This idea that archaeologists are thinking they drug them around with hemp and ropes and all this stuff, and then there's all these legends about how they sang them into place or they did this crazy, seemingly magical stuff.
Right,
and we go
walked or whatever. Yeah.
So we go to the shamanism and talk about how shamanism never died out. So there must be something to it, and we start pontificating on willpower, the power of positive thinking, and all of these various different things that sort of show the power of the mind over the body.
Plus drugs.
Yeah, plus drugs. And then Russ had brought up the sports records that keep continually being broken over and over and over, and now like what used to be crazy is now normal. And I started thinking, applying that to this idea of a culture that was moving these blocks. Right? We don't see their initial small blocks that they were moving around. We see these huge ones at the foundations, and we're thinking probably of the mind. I think we agree on this, that this was pre-diluvial
Yes.
construction.
Yeah.
In other words, before the Great Flood or the end of the last ice age, which we had talked about in previous episodes, roughly about 12,000 years ago,
Right.
when they were doing all of this megalithic construction. And so I was kind of trying to tie that together, and maybe that was part of their technology and culture at that time was this sort of mind magic.
Right, like the way we're breaking sports records over and over now, like with increasing rapidity to where people are doing things that 50 years ago would have been considered just completely and totally impossible. Maybe these guys were on that same kind of track, but with moving large, like large stones. Okay, so they were building stuff, and it's obvious that they were all focused on sacred geometry and building things, like the universe or whatever, like they saw the universe, which does seem to, does, like when you can do it with immense weights, that's, I don't know, there's some kind of spiritual thing about like going into a building that's built with stuff that you're like, holy crap, that's impossible, right? There's something spiritual about it. So like, if they were doing that in the same way that we're doing base jumping or motocross or whatever, they kept breaking their records. So what we're seeing is the very pinnacle of that.
Right.
These just immensely massive, because they were, it was basically four dudes going down
That
there.
they were able to do with less and less guys, with less and less tools, and
it was probably blowing their minds too. Like they're just like, holy crap, like, and because you can see that they keep cutting the blocks out bigger. There's all over the world. What's very interesting about it is that the ones that are still in the quarry are always the biggest ones.
right. And we addressed this idea that archaeologists are like, well, yeah, because when they get it there, then they shave it all down to a small.
They're like, yeah, so we moved those giant ones over there, but this one's too big.
After we get it there, it's too big.
Yeah, just put it down.
Shave it down.
So, if that's the case, and I think Gordon White kind of says this in the way that he's like, so our like Western civilization, basically like modern civilization, has been using metals. Well, metals are main we build things out of metal usually, right? They built stuff out of stone. We've been building things out of metal and using metal for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. They were doing that stone shit for like 50,000 years, so they probably got pretty good at it. That's the way he puts that, So like if you think of 50,000 years of development, using stone as your primary material, you probably get pretty good at it. So the way they were making these geopolymers, which is the word I was looking for earlier, where you make the liquid and then you pour it into it and it becomes stone. We call that geopolymer. So like they had all these technologies and then they would vitrify it or whatever. But we're looking at the very end. In other words, the pinnacle of their ability to do this. Like they're out there light as a feather, stiff as a board, picking up these gigantic blocks with only 4 people, right? And then the cataclysm comes and they just down tools and drop the blocks all over the world because they're getting killed or they're this cataclysmic thing. And there they sit. So just like parapsychology research before the World Wars was like at our level or past it in terms of like they're really discovering the spiritual stuff, and they're really like, if you look at the way that they were doing it then, they were really getting into it. Like scientists, like accredited, you weren't considered fringe if you went to a mediumship,
Yeah.
So they were like more advanced in terms of that than we are now. And then the World Wars happened and that just disappears. Like everybody suddenly focuses completely on the material. Like, well, maybe the flood, this massive cataclysmic deluge that was just killing everybody, maybe that had the same effect on them. Like it wasn't a war, but it was kind of in terms of like death, destruction, and mayhem. Right. So they all like their entire, all over the world, they're suddenly really focused on like, I got to survive.
Yes.
And then once it's over, and it's a 1,000-year period, once that's over, they too are looking at these giant blocks and being like, those were the gods.
Farewell.
Or that was the golden age, right?
Right.
They thought of it as their ancestors, but it was a golden age when their ancestors were badass. Like,
so I wonder if we could test this theory by trying to find maybe going back to the sports thing, like looking at sports records prior to the First World War.
oh yeah.
And then seeing if there was, if one of the like long gaps of time where no one broke that record had to do with war happening or something. This idea that
I know that the World Wars did do that with the record breaking stuff.
Yeah. So this idea that like say physical hardship, physical something like a war or whatever that brings to mind this. Maybe a negative spiritual reaction of like worrying about death or worrying about being injured or dying, or draws us into this physical state of mind as opposed to a spiritual state of mind.
Yes, and I mean you're messing with material tools because like that's what you're using to try to either defeat the enemy or to like stay alive. You're trying to make knives or you're trying to get your machine gun to work or whatever. Like everything is like if you look at the military and the way they dealt with the World Wars, it was all very focused on all this junk that they carried around.
Right.
And nobody was thinking like, if I just sat here and meditated for a little bit, all this would be fine. Like, then, they're like, no, you need to freaking fix that fucking machine gun and go shoot those Germans.
So that gives me another thought. A talisman. Some item that the focus of someone's mind or consciousness or something involving their spiritual activity towards this item makes that item, endows that item with some type of power.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so like, I was thinking when you were talking about wars, the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Right. They carry it in there and they win.
Right.
Whoever has the Ark, they win.
Right.
So, perhaps the Ark, however it was built, like the idea that there's like the hand of God etched some stones and they put the stones in there.
Yeah.
Like the stones have some type of power,
right.
Whatever. But not just that, just anything like, I'm going to wear this amulet when I go to do this fight or whatever.
And it'll make me invincible.
Right.
Yeah.
But that idea is so ancient.
Yes.
That an item can be given some power by human consciousness.
Yeah.
Or activity.
Or if it distracts it. Remember the witch bottles that we talked about, and the door knobbing, right? That modern remote viewers get distracted by shiny stuff. Right?
Yeah.
And the military called it door knobbing because the dude got totally focused on what he thought was this gigantic diamond, right? But it was just a crystal doorknob, right? And then you see that all through the ancient world, they've, in archaeological digs, they find, especially in Europe and stuff, they find these things they call witch bottles or whatever, which is a little container, something, and then they would put a bunch of weird stuff into it, put a stopper on it, and bury it beneath the like the lintel of the house, beneath the doorway of the house, so that if anybody was remote viewing, you would get sort of distracted by this weird thing underground with shiny stuff in it. Yeah, dream catchers, right? So, so that's what I'm saying. It could be
the dream
either way.
catcher is not for your dreams; it's for the other things to stay out of your dreams.
Right. That's right. I gotta get one of those.
You gotta make one.
Keeps that guy in plaid out of your room.
You need to make one,
Yeah,
so
that's
that
true,
you
yeah.
know the power of the talisman.
That's why they hung little like shiny pieces of shells and stuff in the intersections.
Yeah. Yeah, so with the talisman
Doorknobs.
it's could be dangerous to say go purchase one
Right.
because you don't know what actually was put into it.
Right.
And I was actually told by a buddy of mine, Mahmoud, that, and I may be interpreting this wrong, I'm kind of interpreting it into a broader area than he was talking about, but that you can learn the nature of a talisman by putting it under your pillow
Oh yeah. That's gonna
and going to sleep, and you will learn about it in your dreams, what it is, what its nature is. And he was
Right.
talking specifically about stones.
That's absorbing knowledge by osmosis, which, by the way, is the name of that movie, Osmosis Jones.
Oh yeah, that's tying it all together.
yeah. See, man, pro.
Snake Bros.
Snake Bros.
So yeah, and if anybody wants to try this, what he was saying is, Mahmoud was saying, is it's the odd days. So the first day you put it under your pillow, when you go to sleep that night, if you have a dream, pay attention to that one. If it's the second day, an even number, you don't pay attention
But
to
you
it.
still have to put it under your pillow.
You keep it under your pillow,
Yeah.
right? The third day...
Don't think
have
you
a
can
dream.
skip the even days just because you're not gonna learn anything that day.
Right. The third day is an odd number, so you...
Yeah.
If you have a dream... Yeah.
I need to find something to try that with.
Yeah, well, find a talisman. Go buy a dream catcher and put it under your pillow.
Okay, well, what is a talisman? Is it just an object that people have imbued power to? Like, is a talisman, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but is a talisman proactive or reactive? Because a dream catcher is like a reactive thing. It doesn't go out to try to do anything. It just reacts to something happening, right? It stops.
I don't think... Yeah, I think a talisman can be any type of
okay.
thing. But let me look it up to be sure, because I haven't looked it up in a long time. And I thought, okay, here we go. T-A.
So you guys like the bumper music, right? It's badass.
Yeah, we've got a special bumper song coming up that's written by Tyro Willinson.
That's right. The first guest.
Okay, talisman, an object, typically an inscribed ring or stone that is thought to have magic powers and to bring good luck.
So that's a broad description of it. So you're right. It could be either way.
A lucky
Like
charm.
it could be a passive or a proactive.
Charm, amulet, totem, juju.
Juju.
So okay, let's see, here we go. Result in complete, perform a rite, contemplation, religious rite. Okay, these are the origin of the word telos, result, end. Telein, complete, comma, perform a rite.
Complete. That's really interesting.
Late Greek, telisma, completion, religious rite. Arabic, tilsam, talisman. So anyway, yeah, the way I look at a talisman is it's an item that somebody put basically a spell on or endowed it with some power
Intention.
to do something, some power of intention.
Like,
yes.
remember those intention devices that I talked about, where like they would just flip the switch and the red light would come on, and they'd say, "Now focus your intention." In.
Yeah.
Right. That could be a talisman. All you have to do is believe it works, and then it does. It's pretty
Right.
cool.
So better off creating your own if
Yeah.
you want to use one, because then you are sure of the intention that was.
At least reasonably sure.
Yeah. Well, if it was your own intention, you're
Right.
pretty sure.
You could be confused about yourself,
In which case, don't make talismans.
or do, and then maybe you'll learn something.
Yeah, Russ is right. But anyway, we're detangentizing right now.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, I just think that idea basically of a culture, an entire culture over thousands of years that is not just focused on moving stones, but thinking of like the way we think about sports and extreme sports and breaking records, like they could have possibly been focused on their abilities in terms of building.
Right, and then it reaches a point like our sports have now, where it's just where we have extreme sports like base jumping, where no one's keeping time and no one's like doing competitions. These guys are just doing it because it's amazing. But they get into that zone and they're like, holy crap, this is like, spiritual.
Right. So we have, the tallest building competition going on.
Yeah.
Right. And but that's working because
the Earth is flat.
Surely some of that has to do with architecture, but a lot of it has to do with materials, right? New materials, better materials.
Yes.
As our technology develops,
because we don't use stone, by the way.
Right. But perhaps there is a way to develop better methods of endowing things with intention.
Right.
Right. And if we try this like shamans have done for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
They pass on these abilities, and then the pupils or whatever, the
apprentices,
initiate, get the knowledge of the elder, and then also develop their own, and so they build on it in that way.
Right. It's called generational skills. Like stonemasons have this. Like if you kill off all the stonemasons, it's going to take them hundreds of years to get back to the level they were at when you killed them, because it's you start off with a guy who's never done this before,
right?
And he learns some things and he passes it on to his apprentice, and then that guy keeps learning things, passes it on, and so eventually you got people that know too many tricks to have learned in one lifetime, but because they've been carrying it on generationally.
Yeah.
So shamanism does definitely seem to be like that.
Yeah.
Which I need to talk about this in some other show, but like that's why it pisses me off that like there are things in our society that seem, they seem aimed at making sure we can't do that in some ways.
Yeah, and there's a sort of condescending view from science to religion, right?
Yeah. Whereas like all scientists used to be religious. It was like from the religious divinity schools that the first scientists emerged. Hello. I mean, like,
right.
So, and now there's like, oh my God, and you're just like, dude, like most scientists in history were religious people. You guys are like the exception right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they were dumb.
So it's like I'm gonna try to pay attention to this in myself, like more, now that we brought it up in this conversation about moving in and out of more spiritual states of being versus material, because I've definitely noticed that trend like on and off throughout my life, where I get to these points where it's like clairvoyance, is just like bam, I can just discern things and all this stuff, that really well, and I feel a definite connection to God or spiritual enlightenment, and then bam, something happens, or whatever that draws me out of it or something, and then I'm just like, what? Can't do it.
Just today I could read minds.
Yeah.
Today I don't even know.
But if I can do that over the period of my life multiple times, then surely a culture can do it.
Yeah.
Right. Go.
And it's always like we're talking about, because a single human life has the same sort of pattern as history. You have long periods where change is very gradual, and then something catastrophic takes place that changes a bunch of shit really quickly. And then you got another period of gradual, you know what I'm saying?
And sometimes catastrophe creates a greater spiritual awareness.
Right, it creates catastrophe, like rearranges all the cards. It's sort of like a shuffling of the deck, so that you then can have the possibility, not necessarily it doesn't necessarily happen, but you have the possibility of new situations that weren't possible in the old way, the old order. So like catastrophic stuff, even in one's own life, like it's interesting to do this. Like look back at your own history and think of like the worst times of your life, but then think of the things that happened because of that, and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way, but you can see how, like, man, if that really terrible thing hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have done this and then this and then this and then.
I wouldn't have wrote this kick-ass song. That's the way I always look at it. It's like, capitalize on that terrible time.
And it's yeah, this seems really cool that like once you start to get all these symbols and sort of begin to glean an understanding of it, you can like completely be like a hipster in your writing because you totally write stuff that you don't even know you're writing. Like you know, you're like, I wrote that and I didn't even know that it was there.
I wrote that before it was cool.
Yeah. But no one even knew about it to know if it was cool or not.
Did you tell the hipster joke? Who told it?
I told you the hipster joke, yeah.
Did you tell it on the air?
No, I didn't.
Tell us the hipster joke.
All right. So, like, why did the hipster burn his tongue?
I don't know.
Because he ate his pizza before it was cool.
That's awesome.
Fucking hipsters. We're close to the end here. Is there a single tying everything together sentence? Oh, okay, I've got one. I was thinking about
I
this.
drew a blank.
I was thinking of this. There's a when we were when we were still in Rune, right? Remember I used to draw some comics about the band. There was one where you were kind of doing what you were reading something you had written, sent in a text message to somebody about how you're like, here's what I'm trying to write about this in this song. You just like list off this incredibly long list of things, right? That this is what you want to write about. And I was thinking that there's this old comic that I wrote, like long before we knew any of this kind of shit or whatever, where you're basically asking that question. You come up to me and Johnny Thunder, and you're like, okay, so I'm trying to think of it. You know, here's the situation. You name off all this crazy, insane shit, and you're like, I need that in 2 words. And Johnny's like, how about holy shit?
Yeah.
That was my favorite comic that I ever did out of all the Rune comics. And here you are actually doing it. I mean, you're not using holy shit, but like I was thinking that when you were reading all those things, I was like, holy shit.
He's talking about a new song I'm working on right now, having to do with a whole bunch of esoteric
stuff, yeah.
shit. Yeah. So I'm trying to like.
He's like
fit it
listing all the stuff in there, and it's like, you know, the song is very few words, but when he's reading off all the topics that are in there, and he's right, they're all in there. I was like, that's holy shit.
That's cool.
So that explains everything, baby, ladies and gentlemen. Holy shit.
Thanks for listening to our Holy Shit podcast number 11.
Holy shit.
1. 1 is the number of snakes. Because
Just one.
just 1.
Yeah. How many fingers you got, Snake? 1.
All right, so give him the rundown.
So yeah, you can contact us through email at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You can go to the blog, which is getting better, has pictures, and this show will have pictures of snakes.
Picture didn't happen.
That's right. Yeah. So you can go to there. It's brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. And thanks to Laura for the intro. Thanks to Smith Sonic Studios for trying to support us right at the very beginning, even though it didn't work. +4.
Thanks to Tyrell Rolling Stone for the outro bumper.
That's right. Yeah, AWACS Productions, Aethern Studios, DJ AWACS. That's me. But thanks to everybody who's supporting us in this endeavor too. Everybody who's listening, all of our friends.
We have 44 followers.
Whoa.
Wait, is it really 44?
That's 11 plus 4 times 4.
11 times 4.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Get back to work. Adamu.
Tell our friends and family and snakes about us.
That's right.
So we can grow.
Spread the podcast around. Snakes.